Now, Outerplane so far, the bones look really good. What is up guys, Major here. Today's a little bit of a serious one. I do want to dispel this weird cloud that's over Outerplane at the moment, and I just want us to all come together here and understand a couple things, right? They did a lot good, and this patch has an amazing amount of good things, right? And then they did a really shitty thing by just changing the mileage abruptly, right? There was a better way to go about that. They could have eased us into it. They could have discussed it instead of saying it's going to be implemented right away or implementing it right away. They could have discussed it in some developer notes leading up to it in a roadmap, maybe a couple months down the line next year, so that we kind of see where it's going. Now, I do understand why they're making this change. I'm not saying that this is a good change. I'm not saying that this is a bad change. To be quite frank with you, I'm impartial to the change because I do not care one way or the other, and there's a good reason for this. I want to go into what are free-to-play games to begin with, right? Because you have to understand something, guys. At the end of the day, free-to-play is just the title that games come with. We need to be discussing the importance of spending in free-to-play games and how it can help game developers continue to develop and improve the game. I understand that those words seem very polar opposite to each other, but we need to understand that free-to-play games are a great way to enjoy gaming without spending any money. However, it is important to understand that spending in the game is necessary for the game to succeed. Game developers need to make money to continue developing and improving the game, but it is also important to ensure that the business side of game development is not promoting predatory game practices. That is the most important thing. That is the thing that whenever I see people rising up and they're saying something, I'm happy about that. But I don't want that to come with the air of then saying, well, it's a shitty game, it's a shitty company, it's a shitty... Remember, there's the business side and then there's the game development side. The game development side, more often than not, are players, right? People who enjoy games and they want to make the best game that they can. And then you have the business side who just want to make the money. And then there's a balance between those two that we need to come to a happy medium. Treating them as if they're the same is very disingenuous. And I believe that when a game does something correctly, we need to reward it by spending should you have the means. While on a personal level, avoiding purchases that we find to have no value to them. Just because you made a skin and it cost you a certain amount to make a skin doesn't mean that that skin is worth X amount. Remember that some of us would only ever even consider buying a skin for characters who are used in a specific game mode we love. And currently in Outerplane, we do not have game modes like that. We have Arena and we have the guild raids, and those two are what we could consider endgame for now, and Arena is not even a real game mode, right? So for PvP players, we really have nothing. Arena is just a testing ground and that's it. Now ultimately the onus is on the player to ensure that they themselves are not falling victim to predatory practices, because these practices exist in every single gacha game on the market. What we need to then decide is, do we want a gacha game like Outerplane to exist? I personally vote yes, right? There are so few gacha games on the market that even promise a really rewarding RTA system that are not old as shit. Outerplane is legitimately the only one that's offering something that could be good. We don't even know what the RTA system is, but judging off of Epic 7, it's something that could be really good, and it's fresh, it's new. The design may not be for everybody, but it is something that's different nonetheless. It is unrealistic to expect free-to-play players to be able to get everything in game. Now, this is where we're touching on the changes that have been made with regards to mileage summonings and all of that stuff, and mileage carryover, and what counts towards mileage and what doesn't count towards mileage. Ultimately, at the end of the day, guys, regardless of which road they take, I hope they take the road of least resistance here, because the game is at such an early stage that all we need to really be focused on is getting players in, building up the end game content, and building up the allure of the game in the first place. I personally believe, and you guys can fight me on this one, but players, free-to-play players, should realistically expect to achieve 80% of what the game has to offer, while dolphins would be able to get about 90% and whales about 99%. With the more money they spend, diminishing returns would follow. And the reason for this is to ensure game balance and fair practice is taken into account. Now, it is important to actively discourage players from digging themselves into financial holes, as that is detrimental to the entire player base as a whole. Now, Outerplane, so far, the bones look really, really good. We have gear farming, we have the way the gear RNG works. There's enough RNG that it's a little bit frustrating, but we get enough good stuff that it is worth it, and then you can actually build really good pieces and all of this stuff. Like, there's a lot of good things about the game at the moment, and the fact that when we build our heroes there's a limit to how strong they can get is absolutely amazing as is. The only gripe that the system has right now is the implementation of their premium heroes. Their premium heroes, there's a lot to be desired, and I do understand that that is the one system where they do want to try to make some money, but that's a tough sell, and I'll explain. One, they're locking really core abilities behind the 6-star, and that is not an easy thing to achieve. While the characters are viable at 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars, progressively getting better with each star that you add, 6 stars makes them a complete character. With that said, the business side of the game should still be able to generate a good amount of revenue from the majority of players. And how I came up to the stats that I listed earlier is because there was a study that I read that said free-to-play gamers mentioned something around an average of 26% of free-to-play gamers had spent money in a game. Now let's understand what averages are, just to go back to math class real quick. We're talking about multiple different extremes. So multiple extremes where you have games where people are spending, where the large majority of people are spending money, and then you have games at the bottom end on the free-to-play aspect where relatively nobody's spending money. And when you average all of that together, it comes up to 26% of gamers in the free-to-play space are spending money, which makes perfect sense, right? The 1% being the whales, right? The 25% or so being the dolphins and low spenders, and then everybody else, right? So everybody else would be about 75 to 80% of the player base. And if 75 to 80% of the player base are not spending money, they should be getting about 80% of the value from the game. But 80% is still a lot of value, and that is something that we need to take into account. When it comes to Outerplane, free-to-play players to this point have been getting more than 80% value. And now there's a consensus among the community to then say, well, you can't give us a carrot and then make us chase it afterwards, right? Because you've gave us more than 80%. Now you want us to chase the 20%, like we were supposed to be chasing this 20% from the beginning, but you gave it to us up front, and the game is absolutely livid about that. Whereas in my view, again, I am neither here nor there when it comes to that. As long as we don't go too far beyond the 80%, I truly believe that as a free-to-play player, playing as efficiently as you want to, you should be able to comfortably get to 80%. And no matter how you look at it, I'm going to look at this from a, let's use crit chance as an example. That's probably the best way to kind of go about this. The difference between 80% crit chance and 100% crit chance is consistency. That's it. 80% crit chance is still very consistent. That's very competitive. 100% crit chance, you just guarantee it. 90%, you're just more consistent than the 80%. But at the end of the day, 80% crit chance will crit 8 times out of 10. So currently what the game is trying to do in Outerplane is they're trying to move back towards the 80% side, because they've been giving us way more than 80%, and they're trying to restructure back towards the 80% for free-to-play players. How they're doing it and the abrupt nature that they are doing it in is very, 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 very shitty. I don't think the act in of itself is wrong. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense to most people, right? At the end of the day, free-to-play games are great, and we're going to enjoy them without spending money. It's a good way to try out the game. However, it is important to understand that if you have the means, It is not only necessary, it is vital that you spend something on what you think is valuable in that game to ensure that the game developers and the entire business side can be satisfied, generate an income, but also to ensure that the game you are enjoying can be around for as long as humanly possible. Now, I understand that the definition of free to play might be different because ultimately at the end of the day, there's still 3 stars that come from regular banner units. And if you are unable to acquire those 3 stars, then you're sort of left out of this quote unquote meta that we are in. But again, by virtue of the fact that you should be able to obtain 80% of the roster in the first place, getting these characters is only a matter of time. And I will repeat something that I've said before, I think countless times, is expecting to get every single character in the game on banner when they release is a ridiculous concept to begin with. It is a hero collector gacha system where there is luck, RNG, and the percentage to pull these characters is legitimately smaller than 3%, or about 3.5% at the highest. 3%, a 3.5% chance to pull anything means that you could get lucky sometimes and other times you just won't. I just really want to stay as positive as possible and keep the player base as positive as possible, because ultimately this is an amazing game. We don't have another game like this. The closest we have to this are things like Epic 7, Summoners Wars, and like FGO, but Summoners Wars looks like shit. FGO looks like shit. Epic 7 is a really old game. The graphics are still kind of there, but there's just too much, right? There's a lot. It's always inviting new players and stuff like that, but ultimately there's just too much in the game. There's too many characters. It's just too much, right? It's going to be intimidating for most new players, and there's already so much established. There's already metas, there's already strategies, and there's just a lot to absorb as a new player. While Outerplane is fresh, there's nothing concrete, there's no real meta, because there are things that are always releasing, tactics that have not been tried out yet because we just haven't had the time, we haven't had the resources, things like that. It's so inviting to new players at the moment that I want this game to be around, not only because I love strategy games, but because I feel like this is going to be a really, really awesome game if we could just get our minds around the fact that, listen guys, they need to make money as well. We already saw how amazing the things that they can do are. We need to make sure we support them the same way you would donate to a game in development to make sure that it comes to realization and fruition, if I'm using that word correctly. Treat it the same way. If you are enjoying the game, if they are responding, and I have to reiterate this, the devs are responding to what we have to say. They are trying, they are doing their best. Look at the UI, right? Now the business side then came and said, no, we also need to add this business mindset so we can actually generate an income. That has nothing to do with the game side. The game is listening. We have to then say, push back to the business, but not just push back to say we don't want to spend money. We need to push back and say, guys, this is what we're willing to spend money on, and show them we can do that by actually spending money on those things, and then not spending money on the things we're not willing to spend money on. Does that make sense? Things like mileage definitely need to improve, because you either in a game have a pity system or you have mileage, but you cannot have no mileage and no pity system, or only paid tickets go towards mileage. That's ridiculous. I will not stand for that. That is ridiculous. That definitely needs to change. I don't think it's a drop the game moment. We have established a track record with devs at this point that they do listen, and as long as we make it apparent that, listen, this is a problem, you either have to introduce some kind of pity system or keep the mileage. But for damn sure, the free summon every single day needs to add to mileage. That's for damn certain. But when it comes to the game element and mastering the mindset behind why you're playing a game and why you enjoy a game, and understanding that we're not supposed to live in a world of entitlement, and playing the game for free is great. However, if you do have the means to support, you need to do so. Not that anybody's forcing you, not that anybody is pestering you about it, but things succeed when you can support them in any small way that you can. We don't go to restaurants and eat meals for free every single day forever. At some point you need to pay a bill, otherwise the restaurant closes down and they no longer serve food, and you need to find another spot that makes your favorite steak. Nothing can run without money, and we just need to make sure that the game is not being predatory and the game has the best interest of the players at heart. But players themselves, please get into the mindset where you're saying, within your own personal circumstances and budget, spend something. Whatever it is, spend it. If it's the same amount that you would buy a McDonald's meal with, do that. If you want this game to succeed, we need to show them that we are willing to spend. We need to give them constructive feedback. And when they do change those things, we should be spending. This negative mindset of, well, the revenue is XYZ is not helping anybody. The revenue is XYZ because you keep perpetuating that, well, the game is EOS, the game is this, that, the third, and you're actively not spending anything. Therefore, how is it even possible that they could generate revenue when you are busy perpetuating a falsehood while playing a game that you really enjoy? And I know you enjoy it because you're spending time to talk about how the game is messing up, instead of spending time talking about how it can improve so that you can support it, or support where it's doing well so that they can see it, because they can see those matrices. They can see that the pack that's priced correctly and gives the most amount of value is getting the most purchases. So they need to make sure that they align accordingly and start revamping these things so that they align more often than not. Spend where you think the game is giving you a good deal, and don't spend where you think it's not. But if you can spend something, spend something. Even if it's just the monthly Veronica and Valentine packages, I think that costs, I don't even know. That probably costs the same as a couple Subway sandwiches. But that's going to be it for me this time. And remember, the game doesn't suck. The game devs just need to get good about giving the players what they want and not changing things without giving us lead time to it. The game company needs to make sure that they're not hiding really big changes in fucking UI updates, which should have been an awesome thing to begin with, and they're putting really shitty practices, and they're putting a bad taste in my mouth, and likely the bad taste in a lot of people's mouths because of that one dumb thing. And it's the business side. I know it's the business side. So y'all need to stop that. Y'all need to stop that. Stop hiding that bullshit inside a really good update. Everybody's looking forward to the UI update. Thing is gonna look phenomenal. Please, we understand that you guys have an income issue. We understand that you have a revenue issue. Ask us how we can help you. A closed mouth does not get fed. Peace out.